Hi guys, haven't read for a little bit of time, so I want to make sure we're getting back into it because it's funny and I hope that you're enjoying it like I am. So I believe we left off on chapter 8 titled Science, and I'll show you a picture here. "29 hands were raised. There were only 28 kids in Mrs. Jules' class, but Joy stretched both her arms high in the air. She figured it doubled her chance of being chosen. She waved them back and forth and around in circles. Pick me, begged Bibi. Pick me, Mrs. Jules, urged Calvin, sitting next to Bibi. Sorry, Calvin, you're too heavy, said Mrs. Jules. And your toes are too tiny, Bibi. Todd sat behind Joy, but Mrs. Jules couldn't see him behind Joy's helicopter arms. Okay, Joy, said Mrs. Jules. Everyone else groaned. Joy was all smiles. You lose, losers, she said as she headed toward the door. This week, for science, they would be studying clouds. Luckily, Mrs. Jules' class was on the 30th floor. It was the classroom closest to the sky. Last week, they studied dirt. That wasn't so lucky. By the time they made it down to the ground, science was over and they had to turn around and trudge back up. Everyone brought their science notebooks and gathered just outside the door by the closet that wasn't there. Remember, there's this weird closet that's out in the hallway. Mrs. Jules put her hands around Joy's waist. Alley-oopsie, she called out and lifted Joy straight up. Joy giggled. This was why Mrs. Jules had not chosen Calvin. He was too heavy for her to lift. Mrs. Jules set Joy on top of the closet. Just above her, a trapdoor led to the roof. Joy stood on her tiptoes and pushed it open. This is why Mrs. Jules hadn't chosen Bibi. Her toes weren't long enough. A rope ladder tumbled down. One by one, the children climbed the rope ladder to the roof. Be sure to stay away from the edge, Mrs. Jules called up to them. There was a safety railing around the edge, but it was for taller people. Mrs. Jules was afraid her students could slip right under it. She was the last one up through the trapdoor. When she reached the roof, she saw everyone standing at the edge. What did I just say? She demanded. Everyone just stared blankly at her. Alley-oopsie? Asked Damien. Well, at least someone was paying attention, said Mrs. Jules. She told everyone to take 2 steps back and to sit on their bottoms. But then we'll be farther away from the clowns, Matt complained. Sometimes safety is more important, said Mrs. Jules. She pointed out the clouds to her class. That one there is a cumulus cloud. Some of the students wrote it down in their notebooks. Bibi drew a picture of a sleeping giant. The cumulus cloud was his pillow. And that is a cirrus cloud over there, said Mrs. Jules. Bibi drew a picture of flying angels. Hundreds of white feathers had fallen from their wings and had swirled into a cloud. Bibi could draw really fast. What kind of cloud is that one, Mrs. Jules? Asked Benjamin. He was pointing at a dull, dark cloud way off in the distance. Mrs. Jules gasped. If Bibi were to draw it, her picture would look exactly like the inside of a vacuum cleaner bag while the vacuum was still on. But Bibi had never seen the inside of a vacuum cleaner bag while the vacuum was still on, so she couldn't draw it. Everyone, back to the classroom, Mrs. Jules shouted. Double quick! Children scrambled to the trapdoor. Hurry! Ordered Mrs. Jules. Some fell right through. Others got rope burns. Mrs. Jules didn't worry about little things like that. She was the last one through the latch. Sitting atop the closet that wasn't there, she tossed the ladder back on the roof and locked the trapdoor. She climbed down, stepping onto the chains and steel bars. The children were waiting quietly inside the classroom, hands folded on their desks. Mrs. Jules walked to the other side of the room and looked out the window. Either the cloud was moving closer, or it was getting bigger. Or both. What kind of cloud is it, Mrs. Jules? Asked Leslie. There are times when adults hide the truth from children so as not to worry them. But Mrs. Jules was a teacher. And this was science. Take a good look, boys and girls, she said, pointing out the window. Then, with a slight tremble in her voice, she said, That is a cloud of doom. The room darkened. Chapter 9, The Gong. That's Louis. Louis, the art teacher, was filling a green ball with air when the cloud of doom cast its gloomy shadow over the schoolyard. He felt an eerie chill as he pushed down on his air pump. Suddenly there was a loud bang, and the next thing Lewis knew, he was lying on the blacktop. He slowly sat up. He wiggled his fingers. He stuck out his tongue, moved it from side to side. He seemed to be okay. He stood up, still a little wobbly. Bits of green rubber were scattered across the playground. His air pump was on the other side of the dodgeball circle. The ball must have exploded from too much air, he realized. He always tried to put the maximum amount of air into each of the playground balls. The kids liked them bouncy. The bouncier, the better. He picked up a piece of green rubber, then another, and another. There already weren't enough to go around. The school couldn't afford to lose another one. He'd have to sew it back together. In the end, he found 73 pieces. It was unusually dark for the time of day. He hoped he hadn't missed any. The gong! He remembered. He hurried to the principal's office, stuffing cotton balls into his ears as he ran. "You're late, Lewis," said Mr. Kidswatter, but Lewis couldn't hear him. He wheeled the giant gong out of the office to the bottom of the stairs. At one time, the gong had been bright and shiny, but that was before Lewis's time. Now it was dull and heavily dented. A large mallet, also made of iron, hung from a hook bolted to the gong's wooden frame. Lewis unhooked it and took a couple of steps backwards to steady himself. The mallet was heavy, even for someone as strong as the yard teacher. He handed it to Mr. Kidswatter, who easily raised it over his shoulder. Mr. Kidswatter had thick arms, a thick neck, and a thick head. Lewis started the countdown. 10, 9, 8. There was a red dot in the center of the gong. On the count of 1, Mr. Kidswatter swung the mallet and it hit dead center. Gong! Despite the cotton balls, the sound rattled inside Lewis's head and echoed up and down the stairs. Lewis took the mallet from Mr. Kidswatter and hung it back on its hook. He wheeled the gong off to the side just before a river of children flooded down the stairs. "Hi, Lewis. Bye, Lewis. See you tomorrow, Lewis," they called to him as they ran by. He smiled and waved, but all he heard was gong. "Why don't they ever say those things to me?" Mr. Kidswatter asked a little while later as they were leaving the school together. "Maybe if you did something nice," Lewis suggested. "Like what?" asked the principal. "Maybe let a kid ring the gong." "No way," snapped Mr. Kidswatter. "That's the best part about being principal." "Or how about getting some more playground balls for the recess?" Lewis suggested. "Too expensive," said Mr. Kidswatter. "What if I pay for them?" asked Lewis. Mr. Kidswatter laughed. "You? Where would you get that kind of money? Did you rob a bank?" "I have money," said Lewis. "I've written some books about Wayside School." "And you got paid for that?" Mr. Kidswatter asked. Lewis shrugged. Mr. Kidswatter frowned. Lewis hoped he hadn't broken a law. "Did you mention me in the books?" asked Mr. Kidswatter. "Maybe once or twice," Lewis admitted. "You don't say anything bad about me, do you?" Said Lewis. "You should write a chapter about me," declared Mr. Kidswatter. "Call it The Best Principal Ever, with 3 exclamation points." "Well, first you'd have to do something that makes you the best principal ever," Lewis explained. "Like what?" "Let a kid ring the gong." This time Mr. Kidswatter didn't snap at Lewis. He was thinking about it. Lewis looked up at the gloomy cloud. He hadn't paid much attention to science back when he was going to school. He didn't know it was a cloud of doom. Had he known, he never would have made such a dangerous suggestion to Mr. Kidswatter. Number 10. Stuck. Everybody has a special talent. Bibi can draw. Joe can stand on his head and sing Jingle Bells. But this story isn't about Bibi or Joe. It's about Dana. Dana can make funny faces. Just by puffing out one cheek and raising the opposite eyebrow, she can make Jenny and Leslie crack up every time. Or there's this one she calls her goofball face. She puts her glasses on upside down. Then she pulls down one corner of her mouth with her pinky finger, while with the other hand she tugs her earlobe. When Damien and Myron saw that one, they laughed so hard they bumped heads. Even Mrs. Jules laughs at Dana's funny faces. But you need to be careful, Dana, she warned. You don't want your face to get stuck that way. Dana wasn't worried about that. No matter how weirdly she stretched it, her face always bounced back. But that was before the cloud of doom settled over the school. It had been there a week now, even as other clouds drifted past. Each day it seemed to grow a little bit larger. Dana and Leslie were on the playground, waiting for Jenny. It was recess, and Jenny went to get Patches from Lewis. Patches was the ball that Lewis had blown up in more ways than one. Lewis never found all the pieces and had to cut up an old yellow raincoat to fill in the gaps. Jenny, Leslie, and Dana liked Patches the best because it was impossible to predict which way it would bounce. Hey, Dana, there's a giant worm on your foot, said John. Dana looked down at her sneaker. I made you look, John exclaimed. He and Joe laughed. So she looked at her foot? Asked Leslie. What's wrong with that? There wasn't even a worm, explained Joe. Dana felt like a big doofus. Why did she always fall for John's tricks? She made her doofus face. She closed her right eye, raised her left eyebrow, puffed out her right cheek, and stuck out her tongue. When John looked at it, he suddenly felt like a big doofus. Sorry, he muttered. It's just a dumb joke. He hung his head and walked away. Joe followed. Dana felt sad for John. She hadn't meant to call him a doofus. She had just wanted to make him laugh. She liked it when John teased her. Jenny returned with Patches. You missed it, said Leslie. Dana got back at John good. Jenny turned to Dana. Why are you calling me a doofus? She asked. Dana didn't realize she was still wearing her doofus face. She tried to pull her tongue back in, but it wouldn't budge. Her cheek wouldn't unpuff, her right eye remained shut, and her left eyebrow stayed up. That's not nice, said Jenny. Said Dana. Oh my gosh, exclaimed Leslie. Is your face stuck? Dana nodded. Her doofus face moved up and down. So you're not doing it on purpose? Asked Jenny. Her doofus face turned right, then left. It's the cloud of doom, exclaimed Jenny. Leslie covered her hand with her mouth with her hand. The three girls looked up at the dark and swirling cloud. I'll get Lewis, Leslie said, and she hurried away. She returned with the yard teacher a short while later. Lewis laughed when he saw Dana. It's her doofus face, said Jenny. It's a good one, said Lewis. I think I like it even better than your goofball face. But now her face is stuck that way, said Leslie. Lewis thought a moment, then blew his whistle real loud. Jenny and Leslie covered their ears, but Dana's face remained stuck. Lewis didn't really expect it to work. He just liked blowing his whistle. Kids from all over the playground came running at the sound of it. What's up, Lewis? Asked Todd. Dana's face is stuck, Jenny explained. Really? Asked Todd. He poked Dana's puffed-out cheek. It's like poking a rock. Mr. Kidswatter also heard the whistle. Out of my way! Let me through! He ordered as he made his way to Lewis and Dana. What's going on here? He demanded. He looked at Dana. Dana looked back at Mr. Kidswatter. Their eyes locked. It became a staring contest. Everyone wondered who would blink first, but Dana couldn't blink. Finally, Mr. Kidswatter turned away. Cute kid, he said and patted Dana on the head. He headed back to the building. Dana's face instantly popped back into place. Your face is fixed, exclaimed Jenny. Dana smiled, but then she made her face return just to plain normal. She didn't want her smile to get stuck. Even that could be unpleasant. As long as they were under the cloud of doom, she would have to be very careful with her facial expressions. Mr. Kidswatter walked quickly back to his office. He shut the door behind him. He was sticking out his tongue. His left eye was shut tight, and his right eyebrow was raised, and his left cheek was all puffed out. Next one, not right now, but will be chapter 11 called, What's the Point? Bye.